Gaelic Isla. I'm not sure who the First Nations people or the Indigenous people are from this area, but I'd like to acknowledge them at this point. So if there are any Indigenous people out there, say hello. That's what we do in our territory. Wherever we are, we acknowledge the people that were first there, and that's what I'm doing right now. Nugwam Galasleglis, that's my name in my own language, and I'd like to start by sort of explaining that everything I do because I have a community, because I work with a community, and I'm going to invite right now my best friend in the entire universe out because I feel stronger that way, and I'm going to invite Dave back out here just to have a seat and be with me, because that's what makes me feel good. Thank you. So I was brought up on a tiny little island in northern British Columbia. It's about 2 kilometers long, or how many miles, I don't know how that is. It's interesting because you had to get there by ferry or by plane, but if you went in by ferry, well, there was a sign. It was called the Nimkish Band. That was our tribe. And it said an arrow, Nimkish land, and then the arrow pointing the other way, stolen Nimkish land. So welcome. So all around me were artists. My great-great-grandmother was an artist. She was a Chilkat weaver, and her pieces are in museums around the world, and there are probably about 500 artists in our family. So I'm just a small little dot in that piece of the puzzle. I really love how in my small world, in my community, we had the first longhouse after the potlatch ban. So for about 100 years, our people could not practice the songs and the dances or speak the language. And we lived in a remote enough area that my grandfather continued to potlatch. Our family continued to potlatch through that, but in clandestine ways. We had Indian agents that oversaw who we were, and people would look out for the Indian agents because they had to come by boat. So somebody would be on the lookout when you were having a potlatch. I feel blessed that my family continued to do that, and we have our own potlatches still, which is kind of my root, you know? When you go home and you kind of feel something that's really grounding. When I get into Alert Bay, that's the way I feel. And when I go into the big house and there's the sound of the drums, it fills me up. But I also live in the city, and that's where Dave and I went to school in and around Vancouver. Another world opened up to me. And although the design that I became involved in started with watching my uncle, who carved a pole that's at Windsor Castle. Watching him was just, I was mesmerized by his work. And when I moved to the city, I actually went to university and studied anthropology and Latin American studies, worked on a fishing boat. And then I just popped into my uncle's, who was an engraver, and asked him if he could show me how to do it. And 35 years later, I'm standing on this stage, which is kind of fun. I went on quite a journey. I started doing jewelry, and I basically did anything and everything I could. And so I started making furniture. It just so happened that this fellow who worked with Vanak walked by this gallery that had my piece in the window and said, wow, that looks kind of cool. Got my name, gave it to the Vanak designer, who sent me an email and said, you know, we're interested in your work. Would you consider putting a proposal in for the Olympic medals? So I received this email and I thought, junk mail. 2 weeks later, I thought, maybe I better just take a little closer look at that. And it did say he was familiar with my work, so I thought, okay, maybe I better take a look, closer look. I had a kind of bad year. My partner died, and 3 months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had a mastectomy, went through chemotherapy. At the end of that, my mother died. And I decided that what I would do is spend 6 months in a coffee shop. And when you go through chemotherapy, you kind of have this chemo brain. It doesn't really work, your brain. And it was kind of cool because at first I couldn't remember things, and then I thought, oh, I'm just going to go with it. You know, I'm going to relax and enjoy this experience. But I was going through the RFP in the coffee shop, and it was, the first question was, why do you want to design the Olympic medals? So I put, why not? And my friend Shelley Moore, she was there, and she's like, Coco, no, the Olympics are the most exciting thing. I love the Olympics. No, you gotta say something besides that. I'm like, okay. But anyway, it was a long process. The part of this that I want to say is that it took an absolute community to put that proposal together. The chemo brain didn't really allow me to figure out what they were asking. I couldn't even answer simple questions at that moment. So I had friends who helped me every step of the way. It took 3 weeks, and Dave's company put the proposal together. It's part of the reason that I got the Olympic medals. So I'm going to show you a bit about this experience. I did a little book with 15 questions, the most asked questions. Olega iku danala. It's a good day. Every day I feel this. It's a good day. It's a good day to be here. It's a good day to meet you wonderful people and to listen to your stories and hear about design. The medals themselves were crops of a larger piece, so every single athlete received a unique medal. So that's kind of what a medal would have looked like. So this experience about the medals, it was really special, I have to say. The Olympics were somewhat controversial. People were protesting about the costs, and it was on native land. I was interviewed quite a few times by BBC one time, and they said, what about these protests? So I went actually down to one of the protests to just see what it was all about, and there was only one Indian person there, and they were protesting that it was on Indian land, and I thought that was kind of interesting. This is the table that they saw when they were interested in having me put the proposal in. It took 18 months to do the medals, and we had to keep it a secret. But I told my best friend over here, who told her twin sister, and somehow it wasn't a secret, because I was walking down the street and this person walked up to me and she said, hey, I heard you're doing something really cool like the Olympic medals. And I'm like, no, but we did manage to keep it a secret for 18 months. And the pressure of designing it, that was pretty incredible. To know that something you were going to produce was going to be seen by the world, and also representing where I come from, from my village. Would they think it was okay? Would they think the designs I chose were okay? What I did was I chose the orca from a name Galathleglis, which means killer whale scratching her back on the beach, just like me, and the raven, which is my clan. So for the Paralympic medals, I used the raven motif. I did not carve each medal. I actually wanted to, because that's what I do. I engrave, but I figured out that it wasn't going to be possible to do 1,000 medals. This is what the Olympic medal looked like. You can see part of the motif there. But there's a little secret that almost anybody who's seen the medals doesn't know. You'll see in the dark brown spot, the darker colors, there's a grain there. That's a grain of cedar. I brought a piece of cedar in one day, and they took this photograph, and it's on the medals because the medals came from a box. So this was my favorite moment. I worked with a fellow named Leo. He is from Barcelona and really the most masterful mind. I wish you had a chance to meet him, because I'd go in and I'd say, oh my gosh, I think this is kind of interesting. He'd pull out his phone and he's like, yeah, there it is. He knew everything that was cool in the world, and he really did. I was like in awe of him. I actually got the same glasses as him. I was sitting in the lobby and he was walking towards me, and I was so nervous. Should I keep them on? Should I? Didn't know what to do. You see up on the top right, the red book with the disc? That's what Dave's company put together for me for the RFP. And one of the people who works at VANOC told me that what they did was they had all of the RFPs laid out in this huge room, the tops and the CDs. And they saw the CD and they thought, it looks like a medal. So it was like the first glimpse of, and those are my glasses that look like Leo's. But Leo's up there. That's his photograph. He died, actually, before the medals were unveiled. It was the day we were going to do the video of the medal, I got a phone call and he passed away at 39. I have him there because I love him so much. The little picture on the top of the white picket fence, that's where I lived as I grew up in Alert Bay. That's a soccer field. Biggest thing, that's what we did, we played soccer. The picture on the left is my father and my mother. You see me there with the long hair on the right. That's just before I was diagnosed with cancer, so. That's our little village, and my nieces were baptized that day. It was a beautiful day. This box here on the left, that's what the Olympic medals were. When I conceived the idea, that's what I thought of. The cedar box, and it's what we called our box of treasures. We would put our treasures in there. And I thought that the athletes' medals are treasures, so they would come from the box. Early sketches of the medal design. These are later sketches. There's a cup there that says "I love you to the moon and back" that my father gave me, and a picture of my mother down there that I keep on my phone. Sort of all the important things in my world. My Airstream trailer, that was my gift to myself. And I was down in San Francisco when I heard that I got the gig to do the medals. So I started working on them there. And there's an artist named Rex Ray. He's from San Francisco. And I was at the MoMA there, and I was looking at this book of his work, and I just fell in love with it. So I bought it, and I brought it home to the trailer, and then one day I decided to go back to the MoMA, and I'm like hanging out in the gift shop, and I look up, and there's Rex Ray standing beside me. It's like unbelievable. So he was an early inspiration for the medals. If you have a chance to take a look at his work. So this is the design. So this and this are two sides of the box. It's the head of the killer whale, and that represents the athlete. These two are 5 bodies of the killer whale, and they represent the 5 Olympic rings as well as the community of the athlete. Like me standing up here, I'm nothing without these guys. The athletes are nothing without their families, their friends, their community, their coaches, their country, I guess. I'm not very nationalistic, so let's keep that. And this is the design that the Paralympic came from, and it's the raven. And my uncle is a paraplegic. He was the one who taught me to engrave the first time. And he was an alcoholic, and a tree fell on him while he was logging, and it changed his life. And he thinks he wouldn't be alive today if that didn't happen. And he learned to engrave. He still ran a fishing boat without the use of his legs, just an amazing person who really rose above the challenges. And that's exactly what the Paralympic athletes do. I witnessed some of the races that they were in. This one woman from Canada, she had 1 limb and 3 prosthetic limbs, and she won 5 gold medals in skiing. That's amazing. She started skiing at 5 years old. So there's some amazing stories out there. And so I've explained to you how the medals are unique. If you put all of the medals together, lay them out, they will make the one design. So that's how the athletes get connected forever as well. Their design on its own is not the design, but together. So it changed my life a little bit. You know, people were chatting me up a lot. So a lot of the questions actually were, what are you going to do now? Like your life is over, right? You've done this, what are you going to do? I got asked to design this exhibit in Dresden, Germany, and had no idea what it meant to design an exhibit. The fellow who was asking me, his name was Martin Roth, and he actually became the director of the Victoria and Albert Museum after he left here. The first non-British person to run the V&A. So he came and he asked me, can you design this exhibit? And we're having tea, and I'm like, do you have a job description? You know? He says, no, it's okay. It's all right. You can do it. So I bought a book that said how to design a museum exhibit. Like the medals, I was allowed to do anything I wanted, so that's what I did. What it was taking the objects, because during the potlatch ban, There was one potlatch that happened during the ban where they were found out, and the Indian agents and the police came and took all the masks from that potlatch and sold it to private collections. It found its way into different museums. So in the 80s, those masks came back to our village. And we have our own museum now that houses that. So these masks were going to go to Dresden to this exhibit, The Power of Giving. You know, when I go to museums and you look at things that are kind of old, you kind of get sad. You're like, oh, they're just like inanimate. They seem sad because they were taken, you know, nefariously. But what I wanted to show was that there was no sadness there, that we still are a living, breathing culture. So I had the masks in the middle of this huge room, and it was beautiful. It was a massively beautiful exhibit place with windows at the top that looked a lot like our big house, well lit. There were 2 floors. And the top floor I designed like our potlatches, where we have bleachers, where you're watching witnessing the potlatch. And one of my cousins is a filmmaker. So she made a short film of a modern day potlatch. So the people who came to the exhibit could sit here, see the masks on exhibit, but also see a modern potlatch, see those masks in action, to see that they're real life people and that we should be excited that it's still there. And so I set up the whole exhibit with shadows of dancers, and everywhere there was life. And and this is the White Raven on a huge column overlooking the river in Dresden. So I had 2 of those put up there. It was like a kid in a candy store. Like I could do anything I wanted. Can we do this? Okay. It was so weird. It still is. I was able to do some really wonderful things, and I got to speak at a DLD conference in Munich, which was really weird because the New York Times was talking before me and Paul Coelho after me, and I was like this big. and Martin, the director of the museum, was sitting, and he was going to ask me questions, and he said beforehand, he was nervous. That doesn't help. And he said, don't answer any questions with a yes or a no. So he said, do you still potlatch? Yes. Anyway, he forgave me eventually. This is part of the exhibit. There was another floor, so we had 2 floors and this space in between. So I had all these hands made, and they hung down, and they represented giving, and which was what the potlatch is about, is sharing and giving. So I was able to play with that. We actually had to hang all of those, and we had one of those cranes that goes up, like 2 floors. That was freaky. My favorite unexpected moment. I was on the ferry between Vancouver Island and Vancouver, and I saw Rolling Stone magazine. And I saw my medal on the front of the Rolling Stone magazine. You know, what was that Dr. Hook song?
On the cover
of the Rolling Stone. Some of you don't, but some of us do. That was super cool. I'm not sure about Shaun White, but I did love the cover. It was kind of fun. So this is actually what Janice, is my best friend's twin sister, said about her experience in knowing me at the medals, that everyone I knew was so proud. It was as if we all helped shape that honor. We certainly basked in the glory of it. I told everyone who would listen to me that you were my friend, not just because I was proud of you, but it somehow made me feel more significant. You made everyone feel that way. But the truth is that everybody made me feel that way. And there's absolutely nothing that I could do or ever will do that I don't do without the help of somebody. We weren't allowed to keep a medal. Seriously? I know, I'm still in disbelief. Everybody has one but me. But I also don't think that I deserve a medal. You know, I don't do what those athletes do, and they train so hard, and, you know, I ski like this. I did get to hold them. They were 1 pound, which is You know how much 1 pound is, right? It's like a butter. So one woman won 5 medals, 5 pounds of butter around her neck. I met one woman who won 2 medals, and her boyfriend didn't win one. And she said she was at a party, and they were really heavy around her neck, and they kind of hurt. And I thought, her boyfriend's not going to be so happy with that story. I mean, he didn't get a sore neck. She did. They were super heavy. So here's my favorite photograph. That's a Paralympic medal, so you can see how big it is. These are my little hands. And that was a special day because I really could feel my mother that day, who had passed away a year and a half earlier. And it was a moment that somebody captured that I believe was that moment when I was just blissfully thinking about my mother. And this was a young fella who wanted to be a Paralympian, and Omer and I, my design partner, we were the only ones that were allowed to handle the medal with our bare hands. So I asked him if he wanted to, and he was so nervous and his hands were super clammy. But he did it anyway. I just wanted to give him a sense of what he could have in the future in his own life. This is how I felt. I believe in the beauty of family and friends. My mother and father lost 4 sons in their lifetime, but they never lost their love for me, or my brother, or sister, or each other. In 2006, my partner died. Months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and in January 2007, my beloved mother passed away. Through all of this, my friends sustained me. Impermanence, my reality. Like the orca, we travel surrounded by our community, and like the raven, I found a way to see the light again. I have a wonderful new partner and a daughter, both who continually delight me with each moment we share. Since this has happened, I've done a lot of things, and it's been kind of exciting, and I just got back from London. I delivered a piece to the British Museum, a commission for them, and that piece was based on the museum, who has the oldest collection, is the stingiest to give it back. They don't want to. The woman who ran the Umista Museum, the one in my village, she went for her first meeting with them, and she walked into the meeting and she had a gym bag, and she put it on the table, and they said, what's that for? And she said, I'm bringing the mask home. And so she was the one who made so many wonderful things happen. And that's the way I feel. So the British Museum wanted to have a piece that was based on resilience, on who we are and how we're still here. And so this person you see, Gilath Leglis or Corrine or Coco, I'm a product of my entire universe. And I believe in peace and love. And I'm an old hippie. Hard to tell. And I put Free Pussy Riot, like why not? Thank you.